Okay, shall we start?
Yeah, it should be live now, thank you.
Okay. Good evening, councillors and visitors. Can I also welcome Councillor Gordon Moore, who's the Cabinet Member for Finance. You're very welcome to join us this evening, Gordon.
Thank you very much.
And I believe we have 3 outside guests, external guests. We've got David Hoos and Anita Pipes from our external auditors, Mazars, I believe.
Just myself at the moment, Chair. Anita is tied up in another meeting. She may join us shortly.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's fine. And I don't see. Oh, yes, I see his name there. Gurpreet Dulay, who is representing our internal auditors, BDO. So without further ado, shall we move on to the first item? Apologies for absence. Any apologies?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Shaw, thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, any declarations of interest? No, I don't see any hands. And if there's anything that comes to your mind throughout the meeting, of course, don't hesitate to bring it to our attention. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of September 2020, pages 1 to 6 in your agenda. Are we all happy to agree those minutes? Yep, I'm taking that as a yes. Thank you. By the way, before I go on any further, you may have received notification earlier this evening that pages 21 to 25 in your agenda has been duplicated on pages 27 to 31, and Appendix A for the statement of the accounts report is at pages 165 to 187. Item 4, we'll move on to the internal audit progress report, pages 7 to 10. Can I invite Gurpreet? Hello, Gurpreet.
Hi. You want me to go through the paper now? I don't know if Pete was going to say any words first. Happy to go straight into the progress report otherwise.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
I was just going to say, shall I go straight into the progress report? I don't know if Pete was
yes,
going
please.
to say words first.
Thank you.
Okay. So we attach our progress report, which just brings you up to speed with where we are with the various reviews that we've been doing. You should be familiar, hopefully, with this format from the last one that we issued. So after the contents page, there's just a narrative summary of where we are. So there's 2 reports we've completed since the last meeting, one on main financial systems and another one on events, social media and communications. There's a live review currently in field work on licensing as well. On the bottom of that page, you can just see a bit of a summary on where we are in terms of different reviews we've got planned for the year. So you can see most of these, either reviews are complete, which is the 40%, 30% of them, the terms of reference isn't fully approved yet. And for 20%, the terms of reference are approved and those reviews are due to commence in the next quarter. Just over the next page then is a summary of the two reviews that I mentioned, Event Social Media and Main Financial Systems. Both have positive feedback in terms of our opinions. So for the Event Social Media one, we issued a substantial on design and a moderate on effectiveness. There's 1 medium and 5 low findings. Main Financial Systems, there's no highs or no mediums. There's 3 low findings on those reviews. And then just beneath that is a summary of some of the key points. On the social media one, I mean, this was looking at the communication that the authority has with the external world, particularly in terms of the platforms that you use to promote events and other things that the authority does, as well as communicate about COVID and related matters. Looking at how that works, how you analyse those people who are on your platforms and take actions to try and improve the communication that you have with the public and other stakeholders. Largely, as I said, this is positive because we reached a substantial on design. The moderate on effectiveness was just a finding around trying to improve overall objectives for the social media and communication area. So there is a communication strategy. There's not necessarily a separate social media strategy. So we've suggested a recommendation which has been accepted around in a review of the wider communication strategy next year to add in some key performance indicators and more specific kind of targets or actions for what you want to try and achieve as an authority around social media. And on Main Financial Systems, which is substantial on both, where there were only low findings that we issued, this largely focused on areas such as payroll and accounts receivable, so any debtors that you have. The arrangements were sound. The SLA that you have with other authority was in place and approved, but there were some low findings in there around access to the system and ensuring that arrangements are signed off appropriately when access is given. But apart from that, we were largely content with the control environment in both of these areas and hence have reached those opinions. On the next page where it says looking ahead, this is just obviously a quick visual of the whole audit plan that we have in place. So the darker shade of green are those which are completed. The licensing one, which is audit 6 in there, is the one that's underway and therefore will come to the February meeting. The cyber review, which is the third one, we're hoping to get to the February one. The field work doesn't start until the 13th of January, so we'll see where we get to with that one. The fraud risk assessment review number 8, again, has been planned and we're looking to commence that soon. And then there are some in the kind of the darker orange which say to be confirmed, and that's just where we're waiting for the authority to kind of give us a steer as to when those ones may commence. But discussions have been ongoing, but either due to staffing availability in the authority or just the timing of the review needing to be a bit later, but we're still waiting just to confirm when those ones may commence. But overall, in terms of progress, we feel comfortable that come the 31st of March, which is our overall KPI, that we should have delivered the whole audit programme. And I think during COVID, you know, at the beginning, that may not have been a given. But actually, with what we've done so far and where the field work is, we feel reasonably comfortable we should have the audit plan done by the end of March. So we're on track to then issue our opinion for the end of the year as expected. The next page is just around follow-up. So as part of the service, we follow up on any outstanding recommendations from previous reports, and that includes RSM reports as the previous provider. And this is just a quick summary of which reviews those related to. So we followed up anything that had a due date of the end of November 2020 or earlier. So anything that was due on that date or earlier, we checked in with the officers to say, could they provide us an update on where they were up to? Of the 33 kind of recommendations that we looked at, 27 of them, which is a high proportion, higher than what we typically see, so that's very good, have either been implemented or superseded. By superseded, we effectively mean that we're not going to follow up that particular recommendation because we have a review in this year's plan where we're looking at that area anyway, so we will look at it as part of the review, so we don't necessarily just separately follow it up. So that leaves 6 that were either not implemented or have revised due dates. And they have revised due dates between either the end of December or the end of March. So some of those will come to the next committee. But as an overview, 27 out of 33 are implemented or superseded, which is a higher proportion than what we've typically been seeing across the sector. So that's a good position. Over the next page, we just have our standard wording to say that BDO continue to comply with and are compliant with public sector internal audit standards. There's nothing to report to you in any breaches or anything from that position in terms of our quality arrangements. And although the font is a little bit small here, where it says satisfaction surveys, after each report, we do issue a survey to ask those who we've worked with to provide us any feedback. The one that we've had back to date relates to budget management, which we issued to the last committee. It's a scale of 1 to 5, and you can probably just about make out that all of the areas scored at least a 4 out of 5, which for us meets our target. Ideally we want to be aiming for a minimum of a 4 on average, and so that's a good reflection of, hopefully gives you a bit of comfort in terms of the work we're doing and how we're engaging with the authority. And we do ask, how did you find the overall audit experience? There was no negative comments on that one, and they agreed that they found it a positive process. The following page just notes for you the audits that are complete to date. So they're the 4 there that are complete. And then in the back, in the appendix, we have our definitions. So that's a summary of our progress as a service, the reports that we've issued for this committee in terms of where they are. So far, we're pretty pleased with the engagement with the authority and working through the audits that we've been doing. It is a little bit more tricky during COVID because of, it can make things just be a little bit slower. But we feel like we're on track to complete the audit program. And so far, there's no material or significant control failures or gaps or weaknesses that we're reporting. And the opinions have been typically quite strong. Hopefully that trend continues between now and the end of the year. So happy to take any questions on the internal audit progress.
Thank you, Gurpreet. I fear we're not through the woods yet, apart from a little respite of daylight for 5 days over Christmas. It's then back into the deepest, darkest forest until Easter, I believe. Any questions or comments? Councillor Adair?
Yeah, I've just, with all the furloughing and all the grants and all the things that are fed through the council, I was just wondering, is there any fraud going there, people making false claims and things like that, or is there any measurement of that that's been discovered?
So we haven't discovered anything ourselves, but I should add, and maybe Pete will say something on this, from an internal audit perspective, we too, I think that it was the July audit committee, or whichever audit committee was around that date, we issued our kind of overview of fraud report, which has summarised fraud activity or counter fraud activity over the last previous 12 months. And in the audit plan for this year, because of the heightened concern around fraud in general across the sector and across many areas, as you kind of rightly point out, we have a fraud risk assessment as one of the reviews, and we've scoped that review already and approved the terms of reference with Pete and his team. So for the next committee, hopefully we'll be reporting back to you, and as part of that, we'll be also delivering training to different personnel within the authority with what we've seen elsewhere or how to counter certain aspects of fraud. So it's a fraud risk assessment to identify, are there particular gaps or areas where we think the authority may not necessarily have as strong controls, or what that heat map looks like. So it is an area that we're equally concerned about, not on the back of anything specific with the authority, but just sector wide. So that features in our audit plan.
Thank you.
Any Councillor Verdi?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, Gurpreet. Thank you for the update and your reassurance in particular regarding the work programme. But I just a brief question. In terms of looking ahead and the areas that are outstanding, for example, cyber, fraud, risk assessment, and so on. You've completed some, I don't know, 40 to 50% of the program so far in what will be 75% of the year, I suppose, by December. So in the remaining 25% of the year, the 50% of the program that remains, are you going to deliver that with additional resource, or is that just going to be absorbed in the existing plan?
So when you look at the looking ahead table, there are reviews such as licensing, which is number 6, which is underway. So that's already been allocated. The pest and dog control one, we were kind of advised to commence the review at that date. So that's what worked for the service area. With cyber, similarly, that's a timing that worked with the service area. So we booked that in with them for that particular timing. So for those 3, they're booked in timings, one's already started, and so our resources are already allocated. For fraud risk assessment as well, we're just finalising the timings for that, but that's already has a resource allocated, and that will commence shortly. But the 2 which we are kind of question marks at the moment is number 4 and number 7. So that's the recruitment, retention and recruitment one. I think the key member of personnel had either left and there was a new person coming in. And so we were waiting for that individual to come along before we could kind of progress conversations and agree a date. So that's still kind of waiting for that to be finalised. So once that's confirmed, we'll have enough resources to complete it and be flexible with whatever works for the authority. And the business grants one, we've provisionally agreed a timing of that, I think towards the end of January, early February. But given the busyness, if you like, for the authority in that area, and there are additional tranches of grants that the authority are distributing, it will be a retrospective look back at what has been distributed, and a kind of a post-event assurance. You know, would we have reached the same conclusion that the authority did when they distributed these funds? That's the idea of that review, but it will be after the distribution of the funds, which is more towards the end of January. Again, from our point of view, to resource the recruitment, retention, business grant fund, that's fine. We'll have the resources. We're just waiting on when we kind of get the green light to go ahead, but we don't have any concerns with delivering them.
Okay, thank you for that, Gurpreet. And it was actually the business grants one that I was focusing in on. Obviously, very relevant at the moment. But thank you for that. That's absolutely fine.
Thank you, Councillor Verdi. Any further questions? I take that as a no. Okay, the recommendation, councillors, is it is recommended that the Governance Scrutiny Group notes the progress report for 2020-21, Appendix A, prepared by the Council's internal auditor. We're happy to note that. Thank you. Thank you, Gurpreet. That's a very helpful and comprehensive report. Thank you for turning up this evening and tuning in. We hope to see you in the future. On the other side, as they say.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on, agenda item 5, statement of accounts, pages 21 to 188. Report of the Executive Manager, Finance and Corporate Services. Well, I spot Peter's name there. Mr. Linfield.
Good evening. I hope you can hear me. I have to apologise. I've got awful connectivity now, something that's affecting my activity or something. But hopefully, can you hear me? That's the first
You're
thing.
fading in and out, Peter. We've lost you.
Okay, get the gist of what I'm saying. Hello?
Yeah, you just Peter.
Yeah, we're not doing very well here, are we?
Perhaps Sarah will have to do it.
Sarah, can you hear us?
I can hear you, yes. I'm there.
Short straw
Make
now,
it,
Sarah.
make it as brief as you wish.
Okay, so the statement of accounts, we have worked on this from the start of April rather. Finished the statement of accounts submitted to Mazars the second week of June. There has been an extension to the approved deadline for sign off, which is the 30th of November. And I believe David Hoos is going to cover their recommendations and their findings from the audit. Anything else to report? I think in the main, it's just the impact of COVID going forward on the statement of accounts for this year. Obviously, there's been some impact seen to the end of March. This, again, will be covered by David in his summary. So I will hand over to David.
Thank you, Sarah.
Good evening, David.
Good evening, Councillor. You have our, as Sarah's kindly introduced, our audit completion report in draft with you this evening. I think the page I would start is 168 in your papers, our executive summary, which just notes that we expect to issue unqualified opinions on the financial statements and in respect of value for money. And also notes at that point that we've had no questions or challenges from the public, so that the other aspect of our responsibilities. On page 169 of your papers, it sets out some outstanding matters. And I think as Sarah said in her intro, whilst the pandemic has obviously caused lots of broader economic issues, it's also created some financial reporting and audit issues as well, effectively, which are set out there really. Any aspects of your financial statements that involve valuations, so the pensions and your investment properties, are clearly challenging in the current climate in terms of people being able to give absolute certainty about those valuations. So actually you'll see mention there of our work on property, plant and equipment valuation being not yet 100% complete. It's moved further forward since this paper was issued to this meeting. There's very little left to do. There are likely to be another couple of very, very minor potential misstatements that won't be material, won't need adjusting in the financial statements in respect of property valuation. But I should note that actually, whilst our audit opinion will be unqualified on both property, plant and equipment valuation and the pensions valuations, it's likely there will be what's called an emphasis of matter sentence in the audit report. So that's not a modified audit report. It effectively just points the readers towards the narrative in the accounts that talks about valuation uncertainty. And that will be consistent across the sector this year. That's not targeted specifically at Rushcliffe. Page 173 in more detail sets out our work on pensions, which is the one substantive area that's still outstanding, largely out with the control of the authority, but largely because a part of our work on pensions is relying on assurance provided to us by the auditor of the pension scheme itself. And that audit assurance hasn't been received as yet. So we do need to receive that assurance from the pension scheme auditor and then do our work on that effectively. And that, it is probably worth noting, has yet to be received and is likely to mean that the financial statements will not be approved by the 30th of November. We do have a challenge effectively in, once we receive that assurance work, doing our work on it, compiling it for the 26 East Midlands authorities that we work with, getting through our consultation processes. So there is likely to be a hopefully modest delay beyond the 30th of November to allow us to complete that piece of work. Elsewhere in the document, I would just draw your attention to the rest of our significant findings work on page 174. Again, is heavily, I think as Sarah said in her intro, predicated by the impacts of the pandemic. So not least on our valuation of assets work, but also around the work that we've had to do around going concern. So does the authority have the financial health to continue going forwards, and also its impact on value for money and medium-term financial planning. Elsewhere in the document, Chair, I would just note that we raised no internal control recommendations. So again, from a positive note, just tying into the findings from BDO, your internal auditors, no weaknesses identified in the finance systems that we worked with. And actually on page 177 in there, as it's drafted, notes just one very, very minor, a completely immaterial potential adjustment to the numbers, which at that level does not need to be corrected in the financial statements. And finally, Chair, just on 178 and 179, there's more narrative around our work on value for money, which again sets out the conclusions we've reached, which the council does have adequate arrangements in place to ensure the delivery of value for money. And I would pause there, Chair, and take questions with your permission.
Okay. Yes, so any questions, councillors? Comments? I don't see any hands. No. Thank you for that.
Just say, Francis, from a cabinet point of view, I'm very comfortable with the delay. That, you know, to get where you are now, bearing in mind what we've gone through over the last 6 months, you've done an excellent job on this. So I'm very pleased, and also Sarah and her team getting to this stage already. So yeah, I don't think any of us are too worried about the delay, if it's just a few extra weeks. Sarah, do you agree with that, wherever you are?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's it would be nice to have that sort of final conclusion over the audit, but appreciating that it can't be helped with the timing of the pensions conclusion.
Yeah, and when you think at the same time, while we've been preparing these accounts, we've given best part of 23 million pound out in grants, and got a whole team of finance people basically doing another job. So, you know, I'm delighted that this set of accounts are out, 90% ratified, and we look forward to you signing them off completely. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and of course with the pensions item, it's not just ourselves, but of course all the districts and the county council in Nottinghamshire. So there's a queue of us.
There is.
Councillor Verdi, that's your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. David, thank you for the summary that you've just provided. Just going back to the unadjusted misstatement reference that you made, the 42,000, and the year that it was recognised. On page 23 of the report, obviously Peter, I'm not sure if Peter is back with us or not, but our section 151 officer didn't necessarily agree with what you identified there. And then the question is really around if it is allocated to the 2019-20 year as opposed to 2021, what would be the impact on this year? I don't know if Sarah Gordon, you're able to maybe pick that up in Peter's absence, but obviously depending on where that ends up being resolved, it's just the impact it will have on this year's finances.
Sarah, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. It is named as exactly as it is. It's an unadjusted misstatement in the opinion of Mazars. So it won't be adjusted and moved into 2019-20. We've taken the opinion that the grant was received, it was the last day of March actually, but in HMRC's, MHCMOG's eyes, they view that in the total pot of COVID funding for 2021. Given that the impact of COVID has, wholly a majority is hit in 2021, that's where we view that income best being placed. So we won't be adjusting it, and it will stay in the 2021 financial year.
That's good to hear, Sarah. That's what I was hoping for. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Any other councillors? Councillor Stockwood.
Thank you. The report does talk about difficulties in meeting a November 30th deadline. Are there any consequences of failing to meet that deadline in terms of, I know that there's the specific deadlines with the process for external work, but and also within the financial implications, it talks about increased fees and an uplift, and writing separately to the PSAA and Mazars regarding concerns raised. Can we explain what are we hoping to achieve from our letter that we're writing? Are we hoping for the fees to not go up, or are we hoping for that future audits don't create unnecessary burden of work? how we will be measuring the success of our campaign on addressing these issues. Thank you.
Do we have Peter back?
I don't know. Am I back or not? Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Back in the land of the living. Well, I think if perhaps David, you could comment on the first point, and I'll comment in terms of the implications of the of not effectively signing off by the 30th of November. The only thing I will say is traditionally there's if you like, a naughty boys list of authorities that do not sign off by those dates. Now, clearly it won't be just us, it'll be all the Nottinghamshire districts in Nottinghamshire, and whether I'm assuming that's going to be replicated across the country if the same is happening. I don't know if David could comment on that, please.
I can, Peter. Yes, absolutely. I think, Councillor, we have a reporting requirement to PSAA of any of our councils under the contract where we expect not to meet the deadline. And I think it's not inappropriate to say at the moment the vast majority are on that list that won't meet the deadline because this circumstance is replicated across the country. And my understanding, the other audit contract providers on this framework are in similar positions.
So the point on the fees, because obviously that might have something to do with David. That's really me, I suppose, complaining about the fact that the fees have gone up. Some of that is justified. I do have an issue, not just myself, I know some of the other NOTS Section 151s, to clarify with the PSAA in terms of when they tendered for the contract. Why isn't this additional work already counted for within the scope of the original audit? So that's one issue. The other issue is more specifically, and it's something we do have a wash-up meeting after the audit, and certainly I'll be talking to David a bit more about what we do in future, particularly on areas of sampling on our fixed assets, which is our sort of main bone of contention. And Leanne is obviously in on the meeting. It's her team has bore the brunt of some of the additional work that's created. So we do want to talk about that with the view to perhaps having a more pragmatic approach going forward.
And I think, Chair, that's a perfectly fair comment. Peter and Leanne and I have had a number of meetings recently to discuss this effectively, how we can just make the audit more efficient. I think there have been some challenges in the timing of our work across the summer. But I think as reassurance for the councillors, the volume of audit work we're undertaking is no different at Rushcliffe as it is anywhere else. Actually, there is just a question for both sides to continue to seek ways we can be more efficient with our audit approach.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Stockwood, or does that answer your question? You're fine. Okay, thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a quick question about the risk added by the risk management group on page 40. So, they kind of make sense to me in terms of the government funding coronavirus. And then there was the impact of flooding. I was wondering if you could give me a bit more detail on that particular risk, so those two risks at the end. I don't know who to direct the question to.
Sorry, Councillor, is that a reference to the financial statements themselves or our audit completion report?
Good question.
No, it's the just to interject. It's to do with the financial statements. Is what we include in the forward where we talk about risks. Those are actually come from that section is actually taken from what we've taken to this group. So we've already been. This is what's been discussed by this group. So we've looked at. So in terms of risk, we're looking at obviously with the increased flooding that's been happening, making sure we've got sufficient resources to deal with that. And that's something that's clearly a challenge with as climates are changing going forward.
Yeah, so I suppose my question is, if we've got a climate reserve, why isn't that being used for those to kind of mitigate those risks?
It may well do in the future, Councillor Walker. Obviously, the reserve's only just been created, and but it's not just that reserve's there, not just for flooding, but obviously there's lots of other climate change risks. So it's a question of priorities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, any more questions? Thank you, councillors. The recommendation that the Governance Scrutiny Group approve A, the findings of Mazars Audit Completion Report, Appendix A, prior to recommending the approval of the Statement of Accounts. B, the Statement of Accounts for 2019-20, including the Annual Governance Statement, Appendix B, subject to the outcome of the Nottinghamshire County Council Pension Fund Audit. C, the Management Representation Letter, Appendix C, subject to the outcome of the Notts County Council Pension Fund Audit. And D, that the Chair of Governance Scrutiny Group, and for clarity, in the event of my unavailability, the Vice Chairman of the Governance Scrutiny Group and the Section 151 officer have delegated authority for the final approval of the audited Statement of Accounts for 2019-20 and any changes to the Management Representation Letter subject to a satisfactory outcome of the Nottinghamshire County Council Pension Fund Audit, notifying members of the Governance Scrutiny Group of any significant issues arising if required. I move that recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Walker. Okay, anyone against or abstaining? Okay, I take that as unanimous approval. Thank you, David, for a very comprehensive explanation and report. And perhaps we'll see you again in the future on the other side, as they say. Thank you. You're very welcome to stay, by the way. Moving on to item 6, Treasury and Asset Investments, 6-month update, pages 189 to 210. Report of the Executive Manager, Finance and Corporate Services. So over to you, Peter.
Well, Sarah's actually going to present. Leanne's going to be presenting some of the property-based information.
Thank you. Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. So as Peter just said, this report is partially the activities from April to September in accordance with professional practice on treasury management. And Leanne will discuss further the asset investments at the end of the report. So the key points are in paragraph 4.1 to 4.6. There is a summary of the economic background and the forecast. Interest rates have been cut to 0.1 and growth is declining. The lockdown situation is likely to see this continue and employment to rise further at the end of furlough. Paragraph 4.7 explains the investment income projections, and these are currently thought to be above budget. This is due to greater value in the fund available to invest, plus higher interest than expected in our returns. The table at paragraph 4.10 shows this against the LIBID rates, which we show that we're outperforming against those. And at table 4.11, we summarise the council's investment activities. And you can see there's an average rate of return of 0.74%. As expected, this is lower than the same time last year, but as the cut of the Base of England base rates reflects the interest rates that we're able to get, this is in keeping with that. We also are in a position at the moment with COVID that we need to keep our investments in a liquid position. And this means shorter term investments, which go along with lower investment rates. But over time, it's important that we need to balance the need to get a good return on our investments, but also with the liquidity requirements. Paragraph 4.14 reports on the diversified funds. This has been reported to Governance Scrutiny Group previously, and in July, the value had dropped. Well, we reported that at the 31st of March, it had dropped by 1.238 million. And as at the 31st of July, it had recovered by 500k. As of the end of September, this has improved slightly to 574k, and this is expected to recover further over the longer term. And as these investments are initially intended to be long-term, then we don't see an issue with that at the moment. Paragraph 4.17 shows the spread of the duration of the council's investments. And as previously mentioned, this reflects the need to hold the cash in more liquid and short-term investments. Paragraph 4.18 to 4.21 explains the prudential indicators for Treasury and capital, and these are shown in more detail at Appendix A. The key points from these prudential indicators are that the capital underspend is projected to be 1.556 million. The financing cost to net revenue stream is lower than expected, and this is due to higher net costs, or rather lower income from COVID and better returns as previously mentioned. The CFR is less than budget. Again, this is because we have slippage of the capital programme. Paragraph 4.22 to 4.25 refers to the commercial investments which we've undertaken this year, and this is the part that Leanne will discuss and come on to shortly. Paragraph 4.28 discusses the risks to the council associated with over-reliance on commercial income. So we've set ourselves a target of 30% of total council income, and at the moment our current projection is 21.3%, so we're well within the target range at this point. The tables at paragraph 4.29 show the spread of our current investments over the sectors and the values that we spread over those sectors, and this is done to minimise risk. So in conclusion, the economic situation does cause a bit of difficulty within Treasury management. Along with COVID and Brexit, among other issues, they're likely to have a longer term impact on the interest rates and therefore the returns. But any issues that we do encounter along the way will be reported back to this group. So I will hand over to Leanne now to discuss the asset investments, and then happy to take any questions at the end.
Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So just regarding our investments that we've acquired this year. So as has been reported to the group before, the council has invested in commercial property under the asset investment strategy. And this year we acquired 2 assets in Ed Walton. So we offered on these assets pre-COVID, but completed on them this year, one in July and one in October. So as you can see from Appendix B and Appendix C, we considered the merits of acquiring these assets against some set criteria, and this is the criteria that we always use whenever we're considering buying an investment asset. So what we're trying to do here is balancing the risk against the opportunity and the investment return. So these particular properties that we acquired have both have 10-year fully repairing and insuring leases without a break, and a 5-year upwards only rent review. So that's a very strong tenure. Although each building has a single tenant, that has the potential to be a cash flow risk if anything were to occur with either of those tenants. But as Sarah mentioned, we've spread our risk across a balanced portfolio in different sectors to go some way to mitigate that. The buildings are new builds, so we bought them as they were completed. They are well constructed to a high standard, they're a high spec, and they've been A-rated against the Energy Performance Certificate. And in addition to that, the tenants have got very strong covenant strength. So obviously it's not possible to predict the future, and we couldn't have predicted where we are now. But we went through the appropriate due diligence when we were considering these assets, and they were approved by the Asset Investment Group. balanced against the risk versus the return on those assets. So we stand by these as being a valuable part of our investment strategy. So I'm happy to take any questions specifically on that.
Okay, thank you, Leanne. And I forgot to mention, thank you, Sarah, for taking us through that report. Any questions or comments, councillors? No, I think we've had such a detailed, comprehensive explanation. You've answered all our questions. Thank you. The recommendation, councillors, it is
Mr. Linfield is indicating.
Oh, sorry, Peter.
Yes, yes, they are comprehensive reports, and hopefully it gives members the transparency that they require when we've undertaken these investments. I just wanted to remind everyone about paragraph 4.34, where we've got the treasury management training, which is on the 9th of December. That's a plug for all members, but specifically, obviously, this group of your attendance. Hopefully, you'll find it a valuable session. It'll be certainly an educational session in light of COVID as well, which is obviously presents its own risks at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I'm marking off the calendar a bit like Advent. I'm so excited by it. So I'm looking forward to that. Gordon.
It's just a quick one. If when you read about them, they don't really mean much, but if you drive behind the new Aldi at Ed Walton and just drive down the road, you'll see two superb modern buildings. And I've got to say they're, in our view, the Asset Investment Group, they are superb purchases, and Leanne's done a really good job on this. So, but if you go past the new Aldi, just turn around the side, drive down there, and you'll be able to see them. There you are, you'll be able to see the money in the flesh.
Presumably, you're encouraging us to do that if we are taking a necessary trip.
Absolutely. Absolutely. On your way to Queen's Med.
Social distancing.
Yeah.
It is recommended, councillors, that the group notes the capital investment strategy up-to-date position at the 30th of September 2020. So I assume we're happy to note that. Thank you. Moving on. Item 7, work programme. Who's leading on this? Peter?
Yeah, I'll lead it if that's okay, Chair.
Yep.
I seem to have missed half the meeting anyway. I might as well say something. Yeah, sorry. The only thing I was going to point out on the programme is just a change, and we were going to have the Redmond review updates for this meeting, and we thought there was enough on the agenda, so we have put that back to the 18th of May now. Redmond review, just by way of information, that is a review of internal and external audit that Sir Tony Redmond's undertaken, and there's various recommendations there, and I'll be talking through some of those and perhaps some of the implications of that for us as we go forward. I have to say, going back to the issue of audit fees, one of the things that Sir Tony does talk about is the audit fees should increase by about 25%, so there's enough resource for the auditors to undertake proper due diligence. So that is one of the things that's actually in that report.
Okay, thank you. I think yes, you're right. We've got a fairly busy February meeting, so that's reasonable to move that to May. Any comments or questions, councillors, on that item? I take that as a no. Okay. Well, thank you, councillors. I declare the meeting closed at 7:49 p.m. Thank you for your attendance this evening.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.